Hello and welcome to What's Up with ScribeCount. Once again, we've got some good questions, so let's just dive in right to it. Question I got is, how does ScribeCount collect my data? This question came to me from Wide for the Win post, and I'm glad it did because it's obviously clear to me how ScribeCount works, but not so much to everyone else. So I hope I can do a good job of explaining it in a non-technical way. We'll probably start by explaining how I started this whole thing and why we built it to operate the way it does. I am easily frustrated. It's a trait that I worked on all my life. And when it comes to gathering sales data, it would just service and get my blood pressure up. The more platforms I published to, the more time I would spend visiting each one to collect the sales data that I wanted. It was an ongoing problem. And then a book report appeared on the scene. I was overjoyed, especially when he claimed that he would expand it to wide platforms. Well, we all know what happened there, nothing. It's still Amazon only. Then a few years later, Book Tracker happened on the scene. I was all ready to dive in until they wanted passwords. Now, asking for passwords is the same as asking for your banking information. Not to mention it gave control of all your content to someone you didn't know. That was just a big no for me. So I waited some more. Another site arrived on the scene. It only handled a couple platforms, and I had to load all the data myself. And that ran counter to the whole anti-frustration, time-saving core of the idea. So that was a no. I stewed some more. I waited for somebody else to step up until I, wait for it, got frustrated and decided to just build the thing myself. My criteria was pretty rigid at that point. Whatever I built had to work on all platforms. It had to pull the data automatically, and it had to do it all without using any passwords. Now, finding a programmer willing to work within that criteria wasn't easy. I found my current partner within my own network, really, and gave him a list of all the data we needed to pull from the dozens and dozens of platforms and other websites. He had no objections. And then I threw in the hook. By the way, we can't use any passwords. There was a long pause, but to his credit, he said, okay. And long story short, a few years later, we have ScribeCount. So that's the backstory. But let's get back to the question. How do we collect your data without passwords? We do it through what's called a browser extension. It's a software term. Basically, when you log into your various platforms on the settings page, what you're doing is activating the ScribeCount extension. That extension can't see your data unless you unlock the door to it first. What's that mean? Let me back up a bit. Picture your platforms, Amazon, Kobo, Findaway, whatever, as a series of rooms along a long hallway. Now, inside each of those rooms is your data. When you log in, you are basically opening the doors to those rooms. Now, ScribeCount's extension is following you down that hallway and looking over your shoulder into the room to see the data. We take notes on those numbers, and then we upload it all into your ScribeCount dashboard. Now, we can only look. We can't touch. We can't see your banking data. We can't change any of your content on any of your platforms. All we can do is see what your data says. You retain control of the door, and you can shut it at any time. You can also take away those notes that we took at any time. That's why we have that big delete my data button on the settings page. So you have control of everything at all times, and that's what I wanted from this thing. It was the number one thing I insisted on when we set out to build it. So what happens once that door is open? ScribeCount does what's called an ask, which is nerd speak, I'm told, for requesting data from a platform. We do this every 15 minutes. Now, that's for two reasons. First, we want to upload the dashboard, obviously, with any new data. Second, there's a weight limit, I'll call it. Obviously, these platforms don't want people downloading tons and tons of data from their servers. So they limit how much data they will give you for each ask. If you're like me and you've been publishing since 2009, you have a ton of data. So it can take several of these asks to gather it all, which is kind of why it seems to take forever to load your data the first time you join ScribeCount. We're kind of asking them for a 5-course meal, and the platforms are only giving us a bite at a time. So it takes the initial data load. It's a big thing. And once you have all that data into your dashboard, you don't want to delete it unless you really have a good reason. You've been hacked or you suspect something's going wrong. You may want to dump it just to be cautious. But if you dump all that data every time you log in and out, it will take forever for it to reload every time you log back in. So that data that we grab for you stays in a personal file. It's one assigned just for you. It's not mixed with anybody else's. There isn't some big, data thing in the sky. If you log out for a day and then log back in, we only need to pull the data that the platform gathered since the last time you logged in. So it's a much smaller chunk of data. Now, if you wait a week, that data obviously becomes much longer. It's obviously going to take longer to gather and to load. If you only check your ScribeCount dashboard every month, we're talking about a whole month's worth of data now that has to be gathered and loaded. So it's best to log into ScribeCount often, I would say daily, to keep that retrieval time low and your data file updated. Now, that data pull can be interrupted. I mentioned this in a previous video, but all the platforms have security timers. Most are a couple days, some are shorter. If they don't see any activity being made by you on the site, they will simply assume that you are no longer using it and they will log you off. It's similar to the banking websites. They do it for your protection. It's a good thing. And it's not something we can code around, or would we want to. So that's how we pull your data, and that's how we keep it safe. So for ScribeCount to function well for you, it's best to be patient with that initial loading process. It might take quite a while. If you have a huge library, it can take hours to load. More if the platform logs you out during that process. You have to log back in and the process picks up where it left off. Once you have that initial loading done, things get much, much easier. If you log in once a day, you top off the data. It's faster. It's the easiest way to keep your dashboard up to date and adjust it for all the variables that occur. We're talking KNEP updates and currency exchange rates and all the other things that adjust those numbers up and down. So maybe think of ScribeCount as like a little electronic pet like they used to have. One that you need to feed every day to keep it healthy. Doing so will give you the most actionable data and make all of our various tools and other features that much more accurate and easier to use. That's it in a nutshell. That's data download, how we keep it going and how we keep it safe. That's all I really got for today. No idea what I'm going to be talking about next. So if you have something you'd like for me to explain or clarify, shoot me a question in the support button right there in the lower corner. And I'm off to a meeting, followed by some words and probably some push-ups. So have a good one, everybody. I'll see you next time.